Welcome to this week's session of A Life Worth Living Sydney Clinical Psychology's Self-Harm Treatment Program. In previous weeks, we've looked at the biosocial model and at mindfulness skills. This week, we're going to moving on to a new set of skills called distress tolerance skills. Distress tolerance skills are very important skills in DBT. Distress tolerance skills are intended to help you learn how to find your way through difficult emotions. They're also known in DBT as crisis survival skills. Many types of therapy are focused on changing or getting rid of unwanted emotions. Cognitive behaviour therapy is an example of this. In DBT, we were interested in working out both how to accept emotions and also how to change them. I know this can appear quite confusing, but it will get clearer as we go on. So DBT involves skills that are about acceptance and also skills that are about change. Two examples of this are the distress tolerance skills, which are the acceptance-based skills, and the emotion regulation skills, which we plan to discuss in a later session. Coming to therapy is, of course, ultimately about change. Everybody who comes to therapy wants their life to be different in some kind of way. Sometimes, however, we learn to change through acceptance. Sometimes we learn to change through learning how to stay with unwanted feelings, which is what we refer to as acceptance. In practice, it can sometimes be costly for people who struggle to accept their feelings and instead remain continually focused on getting rid of them. An excessive focus on changing emotions can lead to things like avoidance, restlessness, impulsivity, or it can lead to even more severe problems like alcohol and drug use, high levels of conflict in relationships, self-harm, or even suicide. In fact, one of the ways to think about suicide or self-harm is an attempt to control unwanted emotions. In that way, it can be thought of as a problem-solving strategy, and one often with tragic consequences. So let's have a look at how these problems emerge and are kept going. Imagine, for example, someone gets distressed and their emotions start to escalate. The person could accept how they're feeling and ride the emotions out. But it's not always as easy as it sounds. For some people, high emotions can be very scary. People who experience emotions in that way may have a strong need to take some form of action in order to get rid of them. They may feel that their emotions are just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, or that they're going to lose control. Now let's imagine a situation where someone tries something like alcohol or self-harm to cope, or some other potentially harmful strategy. So if it works, the emotions are temporarily released or reduced, and the person may even feel a strong sense of relief. So in this situation, the person learns that the behaviour is effective. And then that means that they're more likely to use the behaviour again in similar situations. Okay, let's just switch gear for a moment. Imagine a situation where a person learns that a sniffle, for example, signals that they're soon to get a cold. We can say that their experience has taught them this. They may notice the sniffle, take something like some medication, and the symptoms might go down well before it gets too bad. Their experience has taught this to them too. This capacity to learn through experience and then use experience to predict what might happen and exert control is a very powerful thing that humans can do. In effect, what happens is we learn what works and then we use it more effectively over time. This can be very effective when managing a cold, avoiding car accidents and so on. We know what might happen and so we act early to avoid it. It's simple and it's effective. Now let's just use that example and apply it to the difficulties we've been discussing today. Let's imagine a situation in which a person is fearful of strong emotions and has found that self-harm is helpful to manage them. What happens? If we take what we've just discussed, it's easy to see that if the person fears an emotion will escalate and get to a very high level, they might start to use their coping strategies earlier and earlier on. and so they might start to use self-harm to head off strong emotions rather than as a response to them. This makes complete sense as they're doing what works in the short term, but obviously this can lead to patterns that are unhelpful in the long term. This pattern can also be unhelpful in the short term if the behaviour causes injury, or if the relief is very short-lived and then it's followed by emotions like guilt or shame. So the thing is, through this process, the person only learns to reduce their distress through unhelpful means, and they don't get the opportunity to see that they can manage their distress without doing these unhelpful things. They also never get to see that these strong emotions can and will come down on their own if they learn to surf them. And so in some ways, distress tolerance can be thought about developing the confidence and skills so that people can learn to surf. That's the end of our session today. We're going to get you now to go off and practice sitting with some urges, and next week we'll look more specifically at some distress tolerance skills.